Okay.
Greetings, listeners in listener land. Welcome to St. Louis in Tune with Arnold Stricker and Mark Langston, where we size up current and historic events involving people, places, and things in areas such as the arts, crime, education, employment, faith, finance, food, government, health, history, housing, humor, justice, and sports.
Yes.
We originate from and connect the gateway city to what is going on regionally, nationally, and internationally. Top of the day to you, Mark.
Top of the day to you. I don't know if that's the way to do it. Yeah.
You're trying to be an Irishman
Is
or
it
Scottishman?
Scottishman? I know. The president's in Ireland, Scotland, somewhere over Ireland. Is that where it is?
Mm-hmm. One of those lands.
I'm hearing that the folks in England are a little upset with him.
Really?
Yeah. I don't think he's going to the coronation, but he's going to go to Scotland. So they were some folks I know from England are.
He's doing some genealogical research.
I don't know what it is. I try to stay out of the politics. I know.
You never know.
I know you don't.
Well, we're gonna skip our return to civility today because I found my lost book, but I left it at home.
My dog ate it.
My dog had eaten my return to civility book, and you've seen that. And our dog's since deceased. And
it's true though. He
became very civil after that.
Yeah, Did he really?
He ate them words.
Oh my goodness, gosh, yeah. He got a good chomp or two into it. Yeah,
he did.
All right.
Our guest today is he's no longer a guest. He's kind of like becoming what I would call he's probably been here almost more than anybody else.
Really?
There's something the Tennessee Williams Festival. That particular executive director, she's been here several times, but right. Ed Wheatley is our guest, and Ed's been on the show. Was this your fourth time, Ed?
Probably, but I mean, sports is what the city's about. You talk about all that civility culture. The city gets its teeth kicked in so much about politics, racial issues, this and that. But the one thing you always want to feel good about, and is really true, and what we should really be waving our flag is, we're the best sports city in America.
Yeah, absolutely, we are. Absolutely, we are.
Yeah.
And Ed's written, what's this, 6 books now?
Yes.
And you have another one coming out soon?
Yes.
And what's that one going to be called?
St. Louis Cardinals, everything you need to know.
And that's what we're talking about today. Yeah. And Ed's he's an Emmy Award winner. Mm-hmm. He's done a lot of things for PBS. Yeah. And Channel 9 as PBS 9, I guess as they call themselves now.
9 PBS.
9 PBS, right? And this book is entitled Incredible Cardinals. And just some interesting stuff.
Well, I mean, The Incredible Cardinals was a kid's book. It was a illustrated book, and this one coming is St. Louis Cardinals, everything you need to know.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, which all my books and where we win the awards and recognition is through the use of photos and the concepts. And this, I was asked to do this book. You're always reluctant to do a book about the Cardinals because there's been so many written.
Right.
Which stick do you have
right.
that's different than everybody else? Incredible Cardinals was who's the guys on the left field wall. We have to remember these are the legends that made the Cardinals the greatest team in the National League and the second greatest team in Major League Baseball. So this one, what was the stick? You just don't want to tell the history, but you want to get young readers indoctrinated in a way. And it turns out that the older fans are going to love this just as much. But we started that as a touch point. We loaded it up about, what is these championships. We didn't do it as a chronological history.
Right.
We took it in different kind of bites to track. This is the topic, like the special moments, the championships. Who are the greatest infielders? Who are the greatest outfielders? Who's the greatest pitchers, catchers, managers? And then the whole story, who are the announcers that made St. Louis baseball so wonderful and great. And it's an approach, and it's just filled with picture after pictures of things in a certain way, they kind of blow up and set back. And the best thing of it is the memorabilia. I mean, there's about 500 or 600 special items of memorabilia in there.
And I know you love memorabilia, and we're going to talk about that a little later when we talk about the St. Louis Browns and that particular project that's going on at the Eugene Fieldhouse.
That's correct.
But this book, I really like the way you laid it out. it really flows well. It
Mhm.
talks about the origin of the team,
Right.
and then it goes into like some stadiums and the owners and stadiums, and then how the teams progressed. And would you, if you briefly go over that story? I think you've told it once about how we actually got the Cardinals, because there were three professional teams here prior to
Well,
that.
I think we were talking about that when we did the sports memories. There were actually 4 Major League Baseball teams in St. Louis, just like there were 4 NFL teams, 2 NHL. The Blues weren't the first NHL,
Right.
and we had 2 NBA teams.
Hmm.
There had been a National League team which was formed in 1876. There was a team that was placed in St. Louis in that first year called the Brown Stockings. People went by the color of their hats and the piping and their socks, and then they lasted 2 years and were kicked out of the National League for betting and gambling and fixing issues. And
Go figure.
yeah, well, that was really big and prominent in
Yeah.
those days, and
Right.
would culminate in the World Series a couple decades later. But then there was a second National League team that came in 1884 called the Maroons, and they had to compete against Chris Von der Eye, a beer salesman, tavern owner just down on Grand Avenue. He was German. He heard about this love of this game of baseball, and he bought a team, and they played in the American Association. They took the name Brown Stockings as well, and they were good. And in the 1880s, they played from 1882 to 1892. They were the premier team in the American Association. They won 4 championships. And at that time, the American Association would play the National League, because the American League won't come until 1901. It won't be formed until then. But the American Association and the National League would play each other in a end of the season World Championship, a la what would be the World Series later on. And the St. Louis Brown Stockings are the only team to ever beat a National League team. Well, the Maroons, who the National League put in there to compete against these Brown Stockings, they just couldn't hold up to the American Association team. I mean, first of all, the American Association team played on Sundays. National League didn't. And secondly, the American Association allowed liquor, beer.
Right.
And, well, what are you going to go? And they played a more fast-paced game. So, the Maroons collapsed after 2 years. And then finally in 1892, the National League said, hey, if we can't beat them, let them join. So they brought them in as the Browns. They shortened the Brown Stocking name to be the Browns. That team wore the Browns moniker until 1898. They changed their name with new ownership in 1899 to the Perfectos. And then they changed their uniforms to that lovely shade of cardinal red. And hereafter, so from 1892, under the moniker the Browns, which is like a cat with 9 lives in St. Louis baseball,
Right,
because
exactly.
all these teams have this name. But that's where the heritage of the St. Louis Cardinals started in 1892. But it's really interesting. We all went in 1992 to all these 100th anniversary events. They all wore 100th anniversary patches, and everything was,
Right.
McDonald's came out with this greatest 100th anniversary team and all this. Now, if you look, the Cardinals are using the 1882 date of the development of the American Association team. So I don't want to say we're rewriting history, but I mean, if you look in Baseball Reference, I mean, last year inducted into the St. Louis Cardinals Hall of Fame, they brought in Charles Comiskey, who was part of those great 1880 teams.
Right.
So, I mean, it's kind of like we're redoing it and using 1882 as the benchmark.
That was another one, Comiskey, as I knew Comiskey Park.
Right, the same guy.
And how many really famous baseball people
Oh, yeah.
actually had some kind of roots or influence here, like Cy Young.
Cy Young.
I didn't know Cy Young played in St. Louis
Yeah.
at all
2
for a
years.
St. Louis team.
Right. It was interesting. See, when I spoke a moment ago about changing your name to the Perfectos and that, Chris Von der Eye had brought the team from the American Association into the National League. And shortly after 1910 area, he'd overspent he was trying to make Sportsman's Park, Fairgrounds Park to be like Coney Island. He was spending all his money. He finally went bankrupt, and the Robeson brothers bought the team, and they also owned the team from over in Cleveland, the Spiders. And what they did was they had the 2 teams, and they said, we're going to put all the best players from the Spiders in St. Louis, and we'll put the lesser players in Cleveland. That's how Cy Young came. He came from Cleveland to St. Louis and pitched here 2 years. But the Cleveland team that they put all the rummies on, I guess you would say, owns the record for the worst baseball team record in the major leagues.
Love
So,
it.
I mean, there's just, that's what you said. The beauty of baseball in St. Louis, as well as the other sports, but baseball, all these touch points, these tentacles, whether it's players
Right.
or tentacles to like the Cleveland Spiders, how they become the worst team in Major League Baseball, because all the good
Right.
ones went to St. Louis.
Right. I think about, obviously we know about Joe Garagiola, but Yogi
Yogi.
Berra. And, oh my gosh, it goes on. We were talking before about Jerry Royce.
Jerry Royce, Carlton.
And Carlton.
I mean, there's 500 wins right there.
Right, and how
Wow.
they just got shipped out, and
Yeah.
we just kind of like, what do you think? We had Gibson, it would have been Carlton on that team, and Nelson
Gibson, Nelly
Bryles.
Bryles. I mean,
Right,
those are all forgotten names, but that's why it's good to write books and bring back memories, make movies. It's, it is special. And, it's just St. Louis, from the one book I wrote about baseball in St. Louis, the leagues and major leagues. I mean, we have such a rich history. The Corey Leagues were created here in St.
Right.
Louis in 1934. So
Right.
all the little leagues, everybody played
Right.
here in St. Louis, and in all the other states came from here.
Right.
There were the periods in the late 40s and early 50s, more men played in the major league from one St. Louis high school than any other high school in the country. It was Beaumont. Beaumont
Right.
was the baseball factory. And
was your dad played at Beaumont?
yes, he did. But, the story was, Beaumont sits where Robeson Field was, where the Cardinals played. The
Okay,
Browns
right.
played at Sportsman's Park.
Right.
And it was the oldest and last wooden grandstand structure in the major leagues in 1920. And it kept catching on fire because in those days, men smoked cigars like crazy, and they just put them down, and the wooden stands would burn down. And eventually, when it burned down, Branch Rickey, who had left the Browns and went to the Cardinals, he came up with the genius idea of not moving the Cardinals, because Cardinals were very bad. They were generally in last place team in those early years in the National League. Branch Rickey talks the Browns into, hey, you're not a good businessman because your place is empty half the time. We'll fill it up. So the Cardinals don't have to take care of a stadium. They invest in the minor leagues as the first to do it, and then wins up with pennants in 26, 28, 30,
Right.
31, 34, 42, 43, 44, 46. That's a mouthful.
So
It is.
Ed, when did Augie Busch or Anheuser-Busch, when did they take over?
They came in the late, it was really in late 52, and they bought the Cardinals. See, what Bill Veeck came and bought the Browns in 1951. He had owned the Cleveland Indians and actually took them to the World Series in 48. But he had to get rid of the team because they had a little nasty divorce problem. But he came to St. Louis in July 51 because he saw the perfect storm. The Cardinals, all those string of pennants
Right.
I spoke of, all those players
Right.
were aging out. Fred Sy, the owner
Mhm.
of the Cardinals, was going to jail for tax evasion over an issue that he and Sam Braden had worked. They were trying to build a new stadium,
Right.
and there were some misappropriations that took place. So they were basically, the Cardinals were headed to Houston, but just like Chris Von Der Eye a decade earlier, a century earlier, had said, I can make a lot of money with this baseball game thing coming to town. Augie Busch said, I can make a lot of money if I own a baseball team. So he bought the Cardinals, and that's when Bill Veeck, he did his little shenanigans with Eddie Goodell, grandstand manager night. He had turning baseball against him, but he also knew he could not compete against Augie Busch.
Now I had also heard that, and this could be just a wives' tale or something, but the name of the stadium,
Sportsman's Park?
or Busch Beer, or
Yeah.
Busch Stadium,
Yeah.
there was no Busch Beer when it was
Well-
named Busch Stadium.
Well, okay, so when the
Are-
Browns leave and all that, the Browns always own Sportsman's Park. So
Right.
when Gussie Busch comes, buys the Cardinal, he's going to buy the stadium. And he said, I'm going to name it Budweiser Park.
Right.
Major League Baseball says, no, there cannot be any association with alcohol, liquor. Well, you think about that today. We got
Right.
gambling, we got alcohol,
Right.
naming these naming rights.
Right.
And Augie says, okay, just name it after me. 6 months later, guess what the new beer was? Busch.
Beer. Right. Okay. So it was the name of the stadium came first.
Yes.
Which is interesting.
Based on his name, and
That's
then
a
they created that just
It's
to
a great
say,
story. Thanks for
you
telling
don't
us.
mess with Augie Busch, right?
No,
Yeah.
That's a great bit of
Yeah,
trivia.
it is
It is.
great. What came first, the beer or the stadium?
Yeah.
It's
The man.
Yeah,
man,
there you go.
right. No
We're
kidding.
talking to Ed Wheatley about his latest book, The St. Louis Cardinals, Everything You Need to Know. This is Arnold Stricker with Mark Langston of St. Louis in Tune. And when you go through these positions and you highlight certain players and, you give enough snapshot that I think if people want to really dig in and get back and find out about it, that particular player, they can.
Yeah.
And you go through the entire,
History.
who is really kind of the best at that position. You pick out everyone. I found the managers were very interesting.
Oh yeah. Wasn't that a shock when you read that paragraph? The St. Louis Cardinals, with all these pennants won by the Cardinals, they have had the most managers in all of Major League Baseball history. I mean,
Really?
Surprising.
that book and a lot of these, when you're doing something pretty good, when you're doing your research and you go, holy cow, you feel like Harry Carey, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Holy cow. That was a holy cow moment when all of a sudden I started reading all these, and it's like, wonder who has the most? It's the Cardinals who have had the most managers in the entire
Wow.
franchise history than
That's
any
crazy.
other team. But I mean, there were some characters, and the issues and the battles between ownership and managers. Johnny Keane, which
Right.
we're all
Oh, my
familiar with
goodness,
in
right.
1964.
I haven't heard that name in a long time.
When Gussie Busch wasn't liking the team, and he's going to hire Leo DeRocher as soon as the season's over, and
Right.
all
Oh,
of
wow.
a sudden the Cardinals take off and win the pennant, and and everybody's loving Johnny Keane, and he says basically, "The heck with you, Augie, I'm going to the Yankees." Or probably my favorite one, and he's one of the greatest baseball players of all time, Rogers Hornsby.
Right.
He takes the Cardinals to their first ever pennant and World Series championship in 26. They get rid of him as soon as the season's over, traded him to New York for Frankie Frisch. He doesn't last, he only lasts there a year. Then he goes to Boston. He only lasts a year. Then he goes to Chicago. He lasted 2 years. In the second year, they fired him halfway through the season, and the Cubs wound up winning the pennant. But the players don't even vote him a share of the.
Yeah, I found that was very
Yeah,
interesting.
it was just his personality. He couldn't get along with anybody, and nobody was as good as him, and he expected them to all be as good as him. But taking it back to the manager thing, I mean, he even kicked Sam Braden, the owner of the Cardinals, out of the clubhouse one day, telling him to get out of this is my clubhouse. And Sam Braden was like in his mind saying, this is my team, therefore my stadium, my clubhouse.
Right. Right.
You're going to go as soon as this is over.
Yeah, he must have been a real pill to deal with,
Oh.
especially if the players don't vote him his share of winning the
Yeah.
World
Wow.
Series.
Yeah.
tie,
Yeah, I mean, he was a very interesting individual. Great ball player. You can't take anything
Right.
away from him.
Oh,
but
yeah.
man, as a person, was a loner. Didn't
Yeah. Bad bedside manner.
yeah.
Well, I don't know about that.
His cleats were too sharp
Yeah,
or something.
ooh.
So changes to the game.
Yeah.
You go into a section about that, about how the game has changed, and even just recently, it's just been crazy.
I mean, yeah, there's so many, basically the game has kind of really always been the same. And we go through changes of, like gloves and uniforms. One of the things I love showing, these pictures, and we get a lot of awards for, the books containing some pictures. Like, we got some like Rogers Hornsby gloves and some of these real early ones.
Right.
There's no lacing between the fingers. They're just like big fat winter gloves. And the old saying, use two hands. You had to use two hands because the hand with the glove really just stopped the ball, and you had to put your hand on it to hold it in the glove.
Right.
There weren't pockets, and then the evolution of that. But I mean, getting to the DH finally in the National League, or when it came to the American League, in the style of play, remember, and this is what they really talk about. How do you bring baseball back? Maybe this will help this year, some of these changes, but think about what Lou Brock and all the base stealing. And then, we went to Vince Coleman and Willie McGee. I mean, that is the action that, it's not just sit there and wait back for the home run. They're on first base and everybody's going, Lou, go,
Right.
And he did, and set all those records. I mean, that was almost those seasons in the 70s. And then again in the 80s and 85 when Vince Coleman came in, that was almost as exciting as when Mark McGwire had his home
Absolutely.
run chase. It was those base stealing chases of Ty Cobb and Maury Wills and things.
Oh yeah. The folks, this book, if you've been around, I'm born and raised St. Louis, and Mark, you have been too. And you would think you would know enough about the Cardinals. This is a great introductory book, or for somebody who's been here and knows Cardinal baseball, it's a great companion to your knowledge.
Is that my copy right there?
Yes, right here on my phone here.
Okay.
And it's just a wonderful book, folks, and I really encourage you to get it. It's available at Reedy Press.
Any store, Reedy Press, online, Martyr bookstores. You can get it everywhere. And I call it a trigger book. A lot of these books I write, I call them trigger books because it triggers a memory.
That's right.
I remember that now. Like when we were talking about, how Augie Bush, lost 500 wins between Carlton and Jerry Royce simply because he wouldn't pay Carlton $5,000 more, and he wouldn't let Royce have his mustache and kept hollering, get rid of that mustache. And people forget it. And you were like, who's that? Jerry Royce. As soon as you hear it, that trigger,
Right.
pops.
Right.
And, how many people will read the book? And I got the section in there about late season 1982. I vividly remember this Sunday I was working in the yard, and radio's going on the patio, and all of a sudden Brummer's on third base, and then Shannon's call of Glenn Brummer stealing home.
Right.
I mean, my God, I thought Shannon was going to go out of the press box. Guy's never stolen a base in his career. What's he do? He steals home.
Slow as a turtle.
Yeah. I mean, that's, when I call about moments. Yeah. We have special moments in the past few years, with David Freese and, Albert. I mean, and this is good stuff because, I go and talk into a lot of schools. They have me come and talk, and I sit with elementary kids and also high school and different courses. And I talk about, what's so special about sports in St. Louis, baseball, whatever. Mm-hmm. Think about last fall. You're in the grocery store, person in front, they got all their stuff on the conveyor belt, and it's going, they're ringing it up. Person you've never met, turns around and says, you think Albert's going to get one tonight?
Yeah.
But sports, and especially baseball, turns total strangers to kind of a friendship of talking about.
Brings people together.
It does. I mean,
Right.
Otherwise, if there's no sports talk, you're just looking straight. You don't give people an eye to eye, but boy,
Right.
it's and that's what these memories. You're going to come back and I got a section in there. Kind of the wackos. Maybe that's not the title. I can't remember exactly what that second, but where Dizzy Dean.
The wackos.
In the 34 World Series with his big sousaphone and all that.
Yes.
And then we get Bob Uecker in the 64 World Series with the tuba out in center
Catching
field during
balls.
batting practice, catching balls with the tuba. I mean, that's the kind of fun and special memories. It's just not all, hey, I threw pitches, he hit a home runs,
Yeah, you have some comments of Bob Uecker in the book, and it's like, people don't know this, but I helped the Cardinals win the pennant in '64. I came down with hepatitis. The trainer injected me with it.
Of course he did.
And he was just a jokester, but he
was a
could
good ball
play.
player. He was a good defensive catcher. He was an adequate hitter, but good. I mean, you talk about he's a good defensive catcher. They said, how did you catch the knuckleball from the Negro down up in Milwaukee at that time, and then Barney Schultz here in St. Louis?
All right.
It was easy. You just let it quit rolling and you picked it up.
He was a pistol.
Of course. That's why not. Why didn't I think of that?
And folks, I'm going to bait you with this. We're going to go to break in a minute here, but you have to go get this book just to hear and read the story about the birds on the bat uniform.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to let Ed say any more about that because you're going to have to get the book to find out.
I got a shirt on with the birds on the back.
Yeah. And where did that come from? And then there was the problem. The birds weren't on the bat.
Just the bat? Without the birds?
You'll have
Was it
to
the
find
bat
out
without
from the book.
It's called By the Book.
By the It's called By the Book.
And that book is the St. Louis Cardinals, Everything You Need to Know by Ed Wheatley, who's our guest. We're going to come back and talk to him about a couple other events that he has coming up April 27th. And he also has an event about the St. Louis Browns that's going on right now at the Eugene Fieldhouse Museum. So we'll be right back. This is Arnold Stricker with Mark Langston of St. Louis in Tune. You're listening to the U.S. Radio Network. This is Arnold Stricker of St. Louis in Tune on behalf of the Dred Scott Heritage Foundation. In 1857, the Dred Scott decision was a major legal event and catalyst that contributed to the Civil War. The decision declared that Dred Scott could not be free because he was not a citizen. The 14th Amendment also called the Dred Scott Amendment, granted citizenship to all born or naturalized here in our country and was intended to overturn the U.S. Supreme Court decision on July 9, 1868. The Dred Scott Heritage Foundation is requesting a commemorative stamp to be issued from the U.S. Postal Service to recognize and remember the heritage of this amendment by issuing a stamp with the likeness of the man Dred Scott. But we need your support and the support of thousands of people who would like to see this happen. To achieve this goal, we ask you to download, sign, and share the one-page petition with others. To find the petition, please go to dredscottlives.org and click on the Dred Scott Petition Drive on the right side of the page. On behalf of the Dred Scott Heritage Foundation, this has been Arnold Stricker of St. Louis in Tune.
At St. Louis in Tune, we strive to bring you informative, useful, and reflective stories, as well as interviews about current and historic issues and events that involve people, places, and things. We cover a wide range of topics, such as the arts, crime, education, employment, faith, finance, food, health, history, housing, humor, justice, and sports, and that's just to name a few. While St. Louis in Tune originates from the Gateway City and covers local topics, we also connect to what's going on nationally as well. If you missed any of our previously aired programs of St. Louis in Tune, simply visit stlintune.com. That's stlintune.com. There you'll find the show notes and everything that was mentioned in that episode and all the other great episodes as well. And if you've got an area that you'd like us to examine deeper, well, just let us know by dropping us a note at stlintune@gmail.com. That's stlintune@gmail.com. St. Louis in Tune. It's heard Monday through Friday on the USRadioNetwork.com and many great radio stations around the U.S. and, of course, right here in St. Louis. Our website again is stlintune.com. Visit us today. That's stlintune.com.
Welcome back to St. Louis in Tune. This is Arnold Stricker with Mark Langston. We're talking with Ed Wheatley, who is discussing with us his latest book, The St. Louis Cardinals, Everything You Need to Know. And if you think you know it all about the St. Louis Cardinals, you don't. And you need to get this book. It's available at Reedy Press and other fine bookstores. And Ed, as we were off air and you were talking about how you structured this book, and could you go into that a little bit? Because sometimes our off-air discussions, we're like, no, we need to stop. We need to do this on the air.
Right.
Well, I mean, there's been, first of all, there's so many books written about the Cardinals every year or whatever. And, to do it, if you're going to do it, you want to stand out. You want to be one that's well received. So you got to do it a little differently, not like them all. And like I said, it's loaded with a lot of memorabilia, special memorabilia things. I mean, it's a lot of autograph stuff because as a baseball fan, you want to see those autographs. You want to, like the famous Enos Slaughter slide, the Mad Dash in the 46 World Series, he signed it. Ray Pardee, the catcher, has signed it. Marty Marion on deck has signed it. The umpire has signed it. So I got all those guys, and to me, that's better than
that's cool.
A plain photo because that's the moment. Right. And these are the people within that moment. So you, throughout this, whether it's Dizzy Dean or Rogers Hornsby, you'll see a lot of things that are pieces of memorabilia and that. But, we took it in a direction that jumps at people like, and there's things to highlight. We talk about championships and that comes after how the Cardinals evolved, which we spoke of earlier. And we talk about memorable moments because there's, the Cardinals have such memorable moments. And, there's been many former major leaguers. I remember talking to Andy Bennis when he first got here, it was in '96. And he was like, it's amazing. I played at the Padres. They have nothing like this, you know? And so you create those special moments, bring them out. And then you get into who were, as we spoke, all these great infielders, outfielders, great catchers. We need to know the Cardinals had some great catchers besides Yachty, and, then the owners, the managers. And there were some things, another fair, we talked about the managers, more managers than any other team in the major league history. The Cardinals have had more MVPs than any other team in history.
Really?
Now, more MVP awards have been given to Yankees, but several of them got multiple MVP awards. But as far as individuals, and that's what I got a story about, enlist them all.
Right, you do.
Who's got the most gold gloves?
Right.
The Cardinals.
Wow.
I mean, you go back into these years, and I kind of segregated the Gold Gloves into, all the pennant winning and playoff
Mm-hmm.
teams, and you just, the only team to have 5, and create a new Gold Glove utility guy last year. Brendan Donovan gets it, but I mean, the
Right.
history of the Gold Gloves when they first, came out in
Well, the Gold Glove
57,
infield of 64,
63,
63. Okay.
63, the All-Star game infield.
Those
yes.
guys were crazy.
They were, and I mean, but it really goes back, and you really, that's when you start seeing things like that, and then you get into the Cy Youngs, and I have a section called award season,
Mhm.
The honor roll, and you really realize how great these guys are, and just the number of men in the Hall of Fame, like we spoke earlier.
Right. Right.
Who would ever, if you weren't really savvy and deep into sports, and maybe as a kid I was just too deep, reading anything and everything I would get was Cy Young was a Cardinal,
Right.
and so many of these other men also spent some time in St. Louis over the years, and the rookies of the year we had, we also had probably a general manager that wasn't great because he kept trading away everybody but Stan Musial, and he tried trading Stan Musial, and Augie said no.
Yeah, which is crazy.
Yeah, but that was a deal with the
Right.
Phillies that was on the table. But you had back-to-back rookies of the year, and he got rid of them right away. And we're talking
Triple
about
Crown winners. Roger Hornsby.
twice,
Right.
Wow.
Hornsby would win it, and it's just one thing after the other. I mean, this, people would say, well, you're going to go write one about some of these teams. It would be hard because this
Right.
history that we have here is so special. And the fan base, I mean, you can't write a history of the Cardinals without talking about the announcers, because they are the men who taught this great fan base. They made it special. They made it real. And as we sit here in the studio with these pictures of Harry Carey behind us, I always use him as an example. When he came and got the Cardinal job, he went to the management and says, you're not doing it right. You have to paint the picture.
Mhm.
Paint the picture. And now this is all different because this was before television. Now, when you talk to McLaughlin and John, and it's like, well, people are seeing it. You can't be redundant. But think before television, the guy sitting on his patio, and he's just listening to the ball game. You could ride your bike around everywhere because the ball game was in everybody's house
Right.
going,
Exactly.
and there was no air conditioning. You always knew the score. But anyway,
Right.
how Harry Carey would come in. Pitcher takes the rubber, looks in, gets the sign.
Mhm.
Here's the windup, the stretch, the pitch, and then whatever happened. But I mean, it's like
You're there.
you're there.
Right.
You're picturing it, whether you're sitting in your backyard or you're sitting in the grandstands.
Or like I was under the sheets for the night game because I wasn't supposed to be up and listening to my transistor radio with my earbud.
earplug. Yeah, I mean, that was everybody's thing.
Right.
That it's amazing how long that took mothers to realize there was a such thing as an earplug to a transistor radio.
Yeah. That's so true. They really did paint a picture. I think John Rooney is the closest
Yes.
that I've heard
I agree
since
with that, Mark.
Harry
Harry
Carey
Carey.
that really paints that picture.
Yeah, I mean, and that is the thing. Some may say we've had a couple announcers that 2 or 3 pitches go by and you've
No.
lost it because
Yeah.
there's other talk. But that's partly the change of our society and
Right.
demands. But love them or like them.
Mhm.
I mean, Harry he painted pictures,
He did.
and there she goes, way
Right.
back. It might be,
Right.
it could be,
Yeah.
And giving you stats
Yes.
about how that particular ball player was doing,
Yeah.
errors,
Right.
or how many doubles, singles, what their batting average was.
Right.
Gave a lot of information about
and
that.
and not only that, as we were speaking again off air, this was going throughout the South and everything west of the Mississippi.
Right.
Led by and the Cardinals had multiple radio stations over their history, and there were times they had multiple in this season that multiple networks covered it. But with KMOX would go out to California, would go out throughout the Deep South and
Right.
Southwest, which also then, because these are the heroes that fans were listening to all the time,
Mhm.
they would come to St. Louis for vacation to
Right.
see these men.
Yeah.
And that's where I think baseball in St. Louis is just, it's hard to compete with.
It
I'm
is.
sure but Boston likes to claim things, or
Nah.
Philadelphia would say this or that, the Yankees in New York, but it's special. It's a religion. We had our holiday 2 weeks ago with opening day, national holiday. And,
I know. Don't you, Ed? Don't you think that everybody should be off work that day?
I think so.
I do. I really do.
Well, I also think
In this town, for sure.
Honestly, when I worked downtown, I would look out. I think before I went over to the games, I mean, they were all down there early in the morning. I think everybody was off work. You know?
I know. It should be a holiday in St. Louis, though. The way folks treat it.
It should be.
It really is a big deal for
Mhm.
us. I mean, it's constantly been a big deal for us in St. Louis.
Ed, would you talk about your event on April the 27th, please?
Okay, yeah, April 27th. I'm partnering with the Missouri History Museum. And the book I wrote, St. Louis Sports Special Moments and Memories from America's
Mhm.
Greatest Town, Sports Town. Because St. Louis is the best sports town. And, like I said, we've got diverse history against all the sports. So much of things in sports were created here. 4 of the greatest trophy championships are named after St. Louisans and originated here: the Walker Cup, the Sinkfield Cup,
Wow.
the Davis Cup,
Wow.
and the Herman Cup. All these things, and the men and the women. So what we're going to do, I put it simply that, hey, I wrote the book. I've talked about the book. You like the book? Come hear it from the people who are a part of this story. I mean, St. Louis was the bowling capital of the world. I got Ray Bluth, the last surviving member of Team Budweiser in the bowling, when bowling was big in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and it all centered out of St. Louis
Right.
with the Team Budweiser, and ABC had their Saturday and Sunday bowling shows.
Right.
Ray Bluth will be there telling stories about that. Justina Bricka, the Golden Girls of St. Louis. St. Louis
Oh, I forgot
tennis
about the Golden Girl.
was the hub of tennis. St. Louis was,
Mhm.
and it was all out of the Armory, where Jimmy Connors, Chuck McKinley, Butch Buckhold,
Really?
the 3 Golden Girls,
Really?
Arthur Ashe.
Now he's somebody.
He could not play against whites or indoors in the winter in Richmond, Virginia. So he left. And where did he come? St. Louis, which isn't the most northern city,
Right.
No.
but it was because the Armory and the way it was constructed, the
Mhm.
floors and the varnish they did it, and the way it was patterned,
Right.
they all said it was so it made their game so special. And how many grand slams had been made by St. Louis? So Justina Bricka and some of the Golden Girls will be there.
Wow.
We were the
Wow.
professional capital of we were the capital of professional wrestling. Sam Muchnick is acting.
Oh,
Cowboy
no.
Bob Orton's going to be there.
Really? Cut
Yeah.
it out. I love
And
it.
then we're going to come in and we got football history. I mean, baseball's going on now. So I got from the football Cardinals, we got Jackie Smith,
Oh,
Hall
wow.
of Famer,
Yeah.
Mel
81.
Gray,
Yeah.
and from
Wow.
one of the greats from the University of Missouri and the football Cardinals, Johnny Rowland.
Oh, yeah.
We've got-
Crazy.
Number
We've got
23.
Soccer. I mean, when you look at this, I got about 10 Hall of Famers going to be there. We got from soccer, we got Al Trost, we got Lindsey Kennedy, who was the first woman to ever play in the MISL.
Wow.
And
Wow.
we got key hosts coming. We've got all these people. It's free. The activities start in the Grand Hall at 5:00. There's going to be a lot of interactive thing. Meet these athletes. There'll be book signings and things. And then at 6:30 to 8, we'll go down and we're going to have panel discussions. Like I said, my books have talked about it. I've talked about it.
Mhm.
I want them to tell their stories
Oh,
That'd be
yeah.
of what it means from St. Louis.
And it's Saturday.
It's Thursday,
Thursday.
April 27th.
I'm sorry.
27.
From it opens up at 5. The Grand Hall stuff goes from 5 to 6:30, and then 6:30 to 8:00. We're going to have this panel discussion on stage. Everything's free. Show up. There's drinks and food made
Mhm.
available at the museum. It's
Thursday the 27th.
yes, it's part of their special Thursdays. And like I said, the best part of it is it's free. And how many times can you sit in the audience with about 10 Hall of Famers?
Oh, never. I can't
No.
imagine.
And then you can interact with them before and after.
Right. Oh, how fun.
And you've got another big event going on right now at the Eugene Fieldhouse on the St. Louis Browns. And you
Yes.
are like the president
Yes,
of
I
the St. Louis Browns.
The Historical Society
right.
and Fan Club. And a couple things. I mean, one of my, wrote the book on St. Louis Browns, and it became picked as the best book published on baseball, led to those Emmy Award-winning movies for PBS. And I've always wanted to put something. Now, the Cardinals have a section in their Hall of Fame on the Browns, mainly around Eddie Goodell, because
Right.
Eddie Goodell's uniform is Bill DeWitt Jr.'s uniform.
Okay.
When he was Bat Boy, his dad was the
Oh, wow.
president of the of the Browns
Who knew?
and borrowed his uniform so Eddie Goodell could fit in something. But so they're great partners.
Love
And I
it.
actually talked to Bill and the people at the Cardinals about, hey, I have an opportunity to put this thing about the Browns up. And what happened also was on Christmas Eve last year, when it was 20 below zero and everything, the pipes burst in the house, Eugene Field house, and
Oh.
kind of flooded it, and shut it down, and all this restoration has to take place in
Right.
there. But just adjacent to it, they are connected by a hallway. They've got this beautiful museum,
Right.
and so we worked out something saying, "Look, I've always wanted to do this. I want to keep your legacy alive. I want to keep your brand in front of the public by bringing people here. They can't tour the house,
Right.
because it's being restored. I'll fill this museum. If 3 million people can go across the street, we'll get thousands in here and keep your brand and financial help going." So they said, "Go for it." We've got 2 unbelievable galleries loaded with 750 to roughly 1,000, and we may get some more, because I was talking to the Hall of Fame at Cooperstown, and they want to get involved and say, "Well, let us go
cool.
through what we could loan also to you." But we've got,
Wow.
when I say there's that many hundreds of things, we're talking the actual authentic, like at the game used bats of the 1922 Browns, which were one of the greatest teams. We got a lot of the players' uniforms through the history. We got the things about Eddie Goodell, the little 3'7" guy coming to bat, grandstand manager night, Satchel Paige.
Right.
And before Satchel were Hank Thompson and Willard Brown, the 3rd and 4th African Americans to join the major leagues. But the Browns were the first team to have 2.
Right.
In July 1947.
And 2 to start, too, right?
2 to start.
Right.
They played out there, and they were the only two together playing for years. And it was 7 years before the Cardinals would have Tom Alston in 1954. And I always, I just got to shake my head. I was taught Boston was the cradle of liberty, the beacon on the hill in American history in 8th grade, but it took them 12 years, 1959, to put Pumpsie Green on the field.
Wow.
So we have this. And people have been through it. We had a grand opening party the other night. It's going to run through the end of October. If even if you want to learn about the Browns, this is the place. You love baseball, this is the place, because all these things from 1902 to 1953, they're there. We got all the VEC things. We got the 1944 World Series. We got a lot of stuff from the World Series where the Cardinals and Browns played here. Cardinals didn't get the Browns didn't get respect. They finally win a pennant, right?
Right.
Right.
Who they got? Do they get the limelight of the whole city? No, they got to share it with the Cardinals. So we tell that story, and it's just one thing after the other, and it's down on Broadway. It's just on the southeast corner of Busch Stadium. You come out the southeast side, or on your way to the stadium before a game. Go and see it. You will learn and love. Your love of baseball will be fulfilled.
And it's a great part of history. And you correct me if I'm wrong on this, because didn't the St. Louis Browns come from
Milwaukee,
and they were the Milwaukee Brewers
That
at
is
that
correct.
time?
And in 1901, the American League was formed, and there was a team in Milwaukee called the Milwaukee Brewers. But St. Louis was the 4th largest town in America at that time.
Right.
And Ban Johnson, who was the president of the American League, he made some adjustments. So in 1902, he moved the Milwaukee Brewers to St. Louis, and they became the Browns. Took the same moniker that had been used by so many other teams. And then a year later, he took the Baltimore Orioles, who play in this interesting history. He moved them to New York as the Highlanders, and then a few years later, they changed their name to the Yankees.
Oh, my.
So the Yankees' heritage started in Baltimore, but unfortunately, Baltimore just doesn't recognize the Browns' legacy.
And that's a question that I had for you. Do you know why that is? Is it kind of like why the Los Angeles Rams don't really have to acknowledge that they spend some time in St. Louis, or what's the deal?
Well, I think there's more personality issues with the Rams. What it is about Baltimore. We've been up there. We've talked to them. I get on the radio in Baltimore and I tell all these stories like we're doing, and people are going, "Huh?" Right? So when Ban Johnson moved the Baltimore Orioles to New York, what happened was a preeminent minor league team developed and took the name Baltimore Orioles and played in Baltimore. Named Babe Ruth, John McGraw. They all these great ball players get their start for this heritage of this Baltimore Orioles minor league club.
Interesting.
And that's what they choose to really rally around and support. And, the Browns, they were losers, but we don't want that, even though they lost a lot when they got there. But, the big quote that I always use is by the Orioles press release that the St. Louis Browns died. They were buried in St. Louis. Their legacy did not come east. I mean, I still have that almost framed hanging. So, but it's the truth. I mean, they just don't, and it's bad. I mean, we had one of the greatest men to ever play the game in George Sisler, and there's no statue of Sisler in Baltimore. And I give Bill DeWitt Jr. credit, well, the third too, that the DeWitts put a statue of George Sisler there amongst all the other Cardinals, and they put in Cool Papa Bell there too. So
Right.
I mean, you find a team in baseball that honors two players that didn't play on their team that's
Right.
not named Jackie Robinson, but that is something special. But you go to Oakland, they got all the pennants flying from
When they were
when
Kansas
Connie
City.
Mack. No, actually Philadelphia. When Connie Mack had
Okay.
all those pennants, he won in the 30s.
Wow.
And you go to Atlanta,
Right.
and their heritage is Milwaukee,
Milwaukee,
and Boston.
Right.
And you go to even you go up to Minnesota. They have a big thing display in the Twins' new stadium about the Washington Senators because they moved
Right.
from Washington to Minnesota.
Is that the same way, like with the San Francisco Giants, the New York
Yeah.
Giants, and the LA Dodgers? and
Yeah, you go
Brooklyn
out
Dodgers?
the Dodger Stadium has all this stuff about the Brooklyn Dodgers and the '55 World Series team and Campanella and Pee Wee Reese and all these men. They herald it, but the Orioles just don't. And
That's a shame.
it is a shame, but yet on the other hand, we kind of like it because we got something special here that nobody does. I mean,
That's true.
I just got called from somebody was writing a newspaper article from New York. Yeah, our luncheons, we still get about 400 people every year at the MAC for our annual Browns reunion luncheon. We on August 10th, we've have a deal with the Gateway Grizzlies, which are just across the river.
Right.
It started when I moved because we used their stadium to kind of make it
Right.
look like Sportsman's Park. It had the locker room and all this with all these authentic jerseys that are now and pants and
Uh-huh.
uniforms that are now down in the museum. And they said, "What is this? This is something special." Yeah. So we started doing a thing where we have a bobblehead of one of the best players I pick, and then we dress the Grizzlies as the Browns of that year. So I picked George Sisler, the first ever MVP in baseball. So they're dressing as 1922 Browns. And I always put the Senators in the visitors just because nobody sees it. And I
Right.
like their uniforms. And then we did Roy Sievers, first ever American League Rookie of the Year in 49. So they wore 49 uniforms. Then we did Don Larson, who was a rookie with the Browns, and he always would be here for
Seriously?
Oh, seriously.
Wow.
And as he says, if there wasn't for a Browns, there wouldn't be a Don Larson. They gave me the chance. Then he made it famous in New York.
Right,
But he would come every year. I'd get there. Hey, when's that lunch? When's that? I want to be there. And he would come. And
That's how he
boy,
talked there.
you want to sit around all night and listen. You don't tell stories. You listen to stories. And Don Larson's talking about being a Yankee in New York or out in Hollywood, with, because of his fame. And then last year, I worked a long time with the Satchel Paige family to prove, what we're doing for the Browns. Look at our resume
Mhm.
and all the things I've done for your father in the spotlight. So
Right.
we had Satchel Paige last year.
Oh, wow.
So we dressed as a 1951 uniforms the year he came to the Browns. This year, August 10th, and we filled the stadium. The stadium is full of people wearing Browns hats, Browns T-shirts, uniforms. We're doing Marty Marion.
Okay.
Now, people remember, hey, Marty Marion was a great Cardinal. Yes,
Right.
he was. He was the MVP in 1944. But he was also the last manager of the St. Louis Browns 70 seasons ago.
Huh.
So he came over in 52 and 53 with the Browns, player, manager, and then just mainly managed. But I just thought, to 70th anniversary, how fitting is that? And we've got a beautiful bobblehead of Marion.
Oh, wow.
And he's in a away uniform. There's a famous picture of him standing on the steps of the dugout, his arms crossed, leaning on his knee. And he's got the away, which says St. Louis in script. It's a beautiful uniform, beautiful bobblehead. And like I said, when you show up for a 4:00 game at 4:00 for a 7:00 game in a minor league stadium, and they're already wrapped around the stadium to get in line
Wow.
for Browns night,
Big deal.
it is a big deal, and
Yeah.
I'm very proud that we keep that memory, and we also keep minor league baseball alive over there.
Well, we're proud to have you on the show and count you as a friend of St. Louis in Tune.
Always here.
And we've been talking to Ed Wheatley about several things. His new book, The St. Louis Cardinals, Everything You Need to Know, from Reedy Press and other places. There's a sports memory event on April the 27th, beginning at 5:00, and that's at the
History Museum in Forest Park.
okay.
And it is open to the public. It is free, and there'll be 10 Hall of Famers there from different sports.
And then also Ed has a great display of the St. Louis Browns down at the Eugene Field House down on Broadway, which is just kind of south of the stadium. And you need to get down. That's going to be there through the end of October. So
Yeah.
great things going on here in St. Louis with baseball. And I'm glad that you have got this fire within you to kind of keep this stuff going and keep us informed about all this stuff, because this you never seem to know, anybody never seems to know enough about the details of all these things, and it's just all the little intricacies that you can uncover.
And the thing I found, it's not just the people who watch the Browns or the old Cardinals. Like for the Browns, it's, hey, why did my grandpa? What was his team? My grandpa or my father? You always see him in a Browns hat, or what was all this about? Or
Right.
A moment ago when I threw out the Golden Girls, you go, oh yeah,
Yeah.
they shouldn't be forgotten.
No,
they were
shouldn't.
great. How many Grand Slams
Right.
were they in and won? Or that one of the Golden Girls, Carol Hanks Allcamp
Mm-hmm.
and Arthur
Oh,
Ashe were the first interracial mixed doubles at Wimbledon.
Oh, wow.
Crazy.
And you know what is the best part? When you go interview these people, they got their dining rooms full of memorabilia.
Mm.
Oh.
You're like a kid in a candy store.
Aw.
Oh, this is my medals from Wimbledon. Here's my Reitman
Yeah.
trophy that I won for the United States because Justina had the last match, and it was whoever wins this match, it's England or the United States. She won it for our country.
Wow.
I mean, it's and Ray Bluth, bless his heart, the farmer bowler, but his dining room is full of all these scrapbooks and everything and pictures, and we're going through them. And then all of a sudden he goes, "Oh my God, I forgot!" And I'm thinking, like, what the heck?
What is it?
And he jumps out of it and he goes running down the hall. He comes out. I didn't bring out my uniform. Here's my Budweiser's uniform.
Oh, my.
Remember how they wore
Yeah.
like jumpsuits when
Yeah,
they bowled
yeah.
on bowling
Oh,
on
that's
ABC?
right. Oh, that's right. They
Yeah.
did those jumpsuits.
I mean,
that's
not
right.
only are we bringing back the memories
Mhm.
for us as fans, we're putting these athletes back in the spotlight.
Right.
Mhm.
And that's,
It's a
like,
big-
Al Trost in soccer, Johnny Rowland, Mel Gray, Jackie Smith. And that's important.
Yeah,
Cool.
it is.
We need heroes.
Yes, we
Yes,
do.
we do.
Yeah.
Desperately.
That's true.
Well, we're grateful you're our hero because you got all this stuff going on here, and it keeps us interested and involved in what's going on in sports in St. Louis. So
Now,
Certainly something to
you,
do.
you learn something are you still learning things?
Oh,
Ed?
yeah. I mean,
I mean-
those Harry Carey moments, holy cow. I mean, I got a couple of, I always got 2 or 3 projects going at the same
Yeah.
time.
And always learning.
And I'm learning and reliving. And,
Hmm.
you see the pride in people
Yeah.
when they react. Just sitting in here and watching your face light up.
I
with
know.
a thing we mentioned. Or something I will say if we got time, how many people have come to me and said, thank you.
Yeah.
Because I had the one story about the I was at a party and a guy comes to me and says, "You the Browns guy?" I was like, "What?"
Yeah.
I said, I guess. He goes, I got to tell you something. And all of a sudden his eyes are watering.
oh,
His wife comes over and says, "Is that him?" And I'm thinking, what
Oh,
the
my.
hell did I do?
Uh-oh.
And-
You're the
and-
one.
And she's starting to tear.
oh,
And then people standing around me are like, what's going on? And all of a sudden she's going, my dad's got Alzheimer's and has had dementia.
Oh.
And this is a public service announcement here. And he said, he sits in a home. I go visit him. We watch MeTV, and we don't really talk or anything. You don't know what to buy him for Christmas or that, shirts. What do you. I got him your Browns book.
Mm.
His eyes burst when he saw the cover,
oh.
and he started opening. He started picking pictures and telling stories of these people.
Wow.
And I've talked to doctors about this, and he said, my dad, I've never had conversations like him. It's like we're back 10 years ago having these discussions, like even when I was a kid, about baseball players. And when I go over there, he does it all the time. He said, I can't thank you. He may not know him as son, but you gave me my dad back,
Wow.
and that
It's very
Is the,
sweet.
I mean, you ask me what I keep doing it. That's the
why,
stuff.
yeah.
And I tell people, if you have someone, in our society, because we're living longer and they're getting this dementia, find these things from their past.
Right.
And they may not remember that, you came in the door, but you will have something that triggers and comes back, and it's special.
I love you.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. We've been talking to Ed Wheatley. Folks, you need to get to those things. We'll post this once we have this broadcast. So,
Wow. You had to end it like that, didn't you, Ed?
yeah.
Just pulling on my heartstrings.
So,
That's-
I mean,
it's very sweet. That's very tender.
yeah. I mean,
very tender.
I'm getting past. I can actually talk about it
Yeah.
without breaking up on
I bet.
on
You
live.
got me going.
I remember the first
know.
time I told
Yeah.
Marianne Carson, we were on live on PBS, and she brought it up. Tell me that story. And I was like,
Oh,
don't
no,
make
you-
me tell it.
Wow.
Yeah.
But yeah, it had to be told.
Ed, thanks for coming
Thank
in
you.
again. Good to see
Always
you again.
talk to you in the next book.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's all for this hour, folks. We thank you for listening. Don't forget, when the Martians invade, they need to learn about baseball and sports in St. Louis. But there's only one race, the human race, and every one of us have different characteristics and is uniquely valuable. St. Louis in Tune is a production of Motif Media Group and the U.S. Radio Network. For St. Louis in Tune, co-host Mark Langston, I'm Arnold Stricker. Remember to walk worthy and let your light shine.